In this session, I'm going to show you how to create a UDP client. So again, as usual, we have this java.io and java.net. This is the class name, and again, it's an application with the main method. What I want to build is a simple UDP client that sends a simple text message to the server and then waits for a response. First of all, add try-catch blocks because datagram socket constructor throws socket exception if the socket could not be opened or the socket could not be bind to the specified local port. As I said in the intro lesson, I'm going to open a socket connection and I'm going to do datagram socket, let's say client socket, equals new datagram socket. And the constructor takes an integer representing the port number, and I'm going to use 0 for the UDP client application. And now you may wonder why we don't use the server listening port. Well, this is different than a TCP socket. You only specify a local port to connect to. The socket doesn't know the remote host or address. By specifying port 0, you ask Java to pick a random available port for you. Also, you can use a datagram socket constructor that does not take any arguments, like this. It's the same. Then, you need to create a byte array in which to store incoming data and a byte array in which to store outgoing data. That is very important. Datagram packets are only bytes. It cannot be strings or integers or anything. The length of the buffer, the byte array, is the amount of data you can send in a UDP packet. I'm using 1 kilobyte for the byte array length. The maximum size for datagram packet is 65,535. The datagram packet contains an IP header and a UDP header. A UDP header has a size of 8 bytes and the IP header has a size of 20 bytes. So, the maximum amount of data you can send in a single UDP packet is 65,508. Now, what is the optimal size for a datagram? The UDP size of the switches in the network is 1500. If you use a larger packet, for example 8 kilobytes, this will cause fragmentation. Loss of one fragment will result in the loss of the entire packet. If you use smaller packets, you'll incur the overhead of the UDP and IP header. So a good value can be 1 kilobyte. Also, the buffer size depends on the amount of data you want to send. For example, if you want to send just a small string message, you can use a smaller size. I'm going to define a string variable, string send data, and let's say hello server. Then convert the string to a byte array to be able to send it with the datagram packet. And I'm gonna call getBytes method. So the send data array will store the characters of our string in a byte array. Okay, in contrast with TCP, there are no streams attached to the socket. Instead of feeding bytes to stream attached to a socket object, the sending host creates datagrams by attaching the IP destination address and port number to each packet of bytes it sends. Next, I'm gonna create the datagram packet. I'm gonna type datagram packet, let's say send packet equals new datagram packet, and the constructor takes the byte array send data, the length of this data dot length, the IP address of the server, and the port number of the application, which we have set to 9090. Let's create an inet address object. Inet address server address equals inet address dot get by name, and I'm gonna use localhost. Once we have a datagram packet, we are gonna send this datagram using the datagram socket send method. Client socket dot send and pass the datagram object just constructed. Now we are gonna create the received datagram. Datagram packet receive packet equals new datagram packet, and the constructor takes a byte array. I'm gonna use receive data byte array in which to store incoming data and the receive data length dot length, and call datagram socket receive method. Client socket dot receive packet. The client waits here until it receives a packet. When it does receive a packet, it puts the packet in receive packet. In a future lesson, I'm gonna show you how to make the receive method to wait for a specified amount of time. And this is very useful for UDP because the datagram packet can be lost on the network and you don't want to block your application waiting for a datagram. After we receive a packet, we want to extract the data from receive packet. I'm gonna use the getData method, which returns a byte array. Receive data equals receive packet dot getData. The received data will hold the data the client receives. Next, I'm gonna create a string from the received byte array. Receive data equals new string receive data, and print the string. Then you'll want to explicitly close the socket to release resources the socket holds. I'm gonna use the close method. Client socket dot close. Right now we don't have a UDP server, so I'm gonna test the application in the next session.